Hey guys, welcome to the Put Me In Coach podcast. I'm Ian, this is Andy, and we are going to be talking all things Arizona Cardinals today. So we're going to talk about what we like, what we don't like, what we're excited about, what we're concerned about, and please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you don't like the things that we have to say or you have some new ideas, let us know.
Tap
All right.
tap in for sure. Let us know. How you feeling, man?
I'm good. I'm good. This is a weird place to start, I think, because neither of us love this team, but we're both curious about this team. So
For sure.
I think in order to get to where we're going this year, we have to kind of talk about last season. Um,
Sure.
uh,
Not a good team last season. Not a good
Not a good
team.
team, not a good team last season, but you know, what did the Joker famously say? Let's wind the clocks back a year.
Let's wind the clocks back a year.
Oh, fully.
Um, I think going in, yeah, right.
Pencil gone.
Exactly.
Yeah, fully.
It's
Yeah.
gone. I
Right.
think, I think what's interesting to me is going into last season, we were so out on this football team. The fan base was really disappointed with Jonathan Gannon being hired. It was off the heels of Cliff being fired, Steve Keim being fired, and it was a messy firing. There were some alcohol issues. There were some weird things going on with Steve
Mm-hmm.
Keim. Um, and it just felt like after that team introductory viral video of Jonathan Gannon coming across like Michael Scott in an episode of The
Yeah.
Office that we were like,
That's
this is going to be
exactly
the
who he came across like. That's
yeah, it
such
was,
a good God, such a good comparison.
Shots, explosives. You can run.
it just
It was
felt
definitely
like
Michael
a
Scott
spoof of a
vibes.
coach. It was like, what is
Yeah.
this? And it just felt like this was going to be the worst team in the league, bar none. And we were in for a really long season, and they were bad, but they were competitive. And
For sure.
I just, I'm a little bit excited about where they're going. So let's get into a little bit of last season before we dive too much into the draft and kind of what we like about them for this year.
Sure.
Close games, close
A
losses
lot of
last
close
year?
games, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I actually wrote it down. So yeah, in week 1 they lost by 4 points. In week 2 they lost by 3 points. In week 11 they lost by 5 points, and then in week 18 they lost by 1 point. So if you add those all up, they basically lost by a grand total of 2 touchdowns in all those games. And
Right.
that, I mean, when you're talking about a 4-13 team potentially being like an 8-9 team or 8, whatever you want to make it, I guess whichever one you want to make the split. That's a big difference. That's a big difference in the NFL, In 4-13, you feel like that's like dog water, dumpster fire, terrible, terrible, terrible. But then when you look at how close all these games were, especially knowing that 2 of those games you didn't even have Kyler out there, and then 2 of them you did, and it started to make sense, right? It's like, of course, they were more competitive with Kyler, but
They were
I don't
3 and
know
4
with
with Tyler.
that. Yeah,
after
no,
he
that's what
came
I'm
back.
referring to, right? So
Only
it's
once
like,
they won a game without him. But again,
Yeah.
it's Clayton Tune and Josh Dobbs
100%.
running quarterback from weeks 1 through week 10, and then Kyler comes in week 10. They go 3 and 4, and with Kyler, they won a game on the road in Pittsburgh and a game on the road in Philadelphia. That's 2 playoff teams.
Yeah,
It's interesting.
100%.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. They have a new GM. This guy named Awesome Fort,
Awesome
Monty
Fort, yep.
Awesome Fort, and they had themselves a bit of a draft. They had 7 picks in the first 3 rounds, which it's a good place to start rebuild wise. Let's get into the obvious because I feel like between the two of us, we've done so much glazing on this guy already, but it has to be mentioned. When we get to these teams, we have to talk about the guys that we love. They took Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4, and you and I both feel like he's the best player in this draft. So
I do.
talk to me about Marv a little bit.
Dude, what's there to say? I mean, 6'3", 209 pounds, 31-inch arms, I believe. Yeah. I mean, 9.5-inch hands, I think is what I have here. That's a freak of nature, dude. I mean, that's got to be, when I was like doing all this kind of scouting for this video and looking at all these Arizona Cardinals things, I watched this video on YouTube and this guy said, he's the best receiver I've ever scouted, and you're like, yeah, that checks out to me. There's always a flaw that you can find in somebody's game. And I don't claim to be a scout at all, right? So if I can go through and find a flaw, real scouts can. And when I watch this kid, I'm like, oh, Hall of Famer. You know what I mean? Like this is like the most polished player I've ever seen come into the league. And he puts up 1,000+ yards last year. I think it was 14 touchdowns, and he had Kyle McCord throwing him the ball. You and I know this well. We're Big Ten guys. We're Michigan guys. Kyle McCord sucks. He's not a good quarterback.
Right.
So
he still won the Blinkoff Award as well.
That's what I mean. To have those numbers with a quarterback who objectively isn't good, right? Like, didn't he leave and go to Syracuse or something like that?
Yeah, so, they got a transfer in this year to start.
They kicked him out. They're like, yeah, you didn't beat Michigan. You got to get out of here. And all year, I think I was watching Marv thinking, in my head thinking, Michigan's we're winning the Natty this year. This is the year. This is the year. And then you're staring at that game in late November and you're like, please don't come in here and ruin my party. Please don't come in here and ruin my party.
You know what I mean? He balled in that game.
And he almost did. No, he really almost did. And you think, when it comes to Michigan secondary, right? Like, it's a very good secondary. You think Mikey Sanders still. You think Will Johnson. You're like, yeah, we're gonna lock him down. No, we didn't. We sure didn't.
No, we didn't.
You know what I mean? He had his way, and it.
Yeah. We did lock down a lot of other players, too, that we played.
We did. No, 100%.
Including
100%
Roma
we
Dunze.
did. Yes, 100% we did. So to see Marv, have 100+ yards in that game, and I think he ran a touchdown. I don't know if he caught a touchdown, but he ran a touchdown for sure. Did he catch a touchdown?
I think he had that big catch at the end of the first half that put them in position, or at the end of the
perfect.
Going into halftime, you know what I'm talking about?
He had a couple amazing catches in that game that were absolutely game-changing moments. And I just think when you think about, you and I talk a lot about like your landing spot, right? And when you're going into a situation where there's not really a number two involved, there's not really a lot of mouths to feed, and you have a quarterback who we've seen can be a top 10 talent when given, the proper pieces around him, you have to imagine that like this kid's gonna pop off this year. Like I don't know if it's like outlandish to say, this time next year we should be talking about him as a top 10 receiver and probably more of like a top 8 receiver, right? That's really the ceiling I have for him just in his rookie year, which I think is insane, right? I've never talked about a player like, oh yeah, he'll be top 10 next year, where I really truly believe it.
I think he's the best since Jamar that we've had. But even Jamar,
even that, it's like I wasn't. Yeah, I was high on Jamar, but I wasn't like
not like
he'll be the best receiver in the league next year, right? It's like Marv. If you told me next year Marv was like, there was 5 receivers better than him, 6 receivers better than him, I'd be like, yeah, who are those 6 though? You know what I mean? Like that's really how I feel about him. So yeah, man, I don't know. I mean, I think you can't go wrong there. You can't go wrong taking a generational talent. And I think as you and I have touched on before, I think he is the generational talent of this draft. Not Caleb, not Jaden Daniels, not Drake May. It's Marv. But
yeah,
that's my spiel, man. I don't know. How do you feel about it?
I totally agree. And the thing is, you've seen what Brian Hartline, Ohio State's receiver coach, has come out and said about him. And I know people are going to say like, well, that's his coach. He's got to say this. But you have to understand, to be able to separate in terms of optical talent from Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Jackson Smith and Jigba with a quarterback downgrade, right? It can't be overstated. That's a huge deal. And that's an incredible, that's a huge indictment on how gifted this guy is at playing receiver, because those are 3 first-round NFL receivers. And he looked better than all of those guys looked at their pinnacle moments at Ohio State. And they had CJ. So to go down to Kyle McCord and still look better than those guys did, it's huge. And those guys are no
Period.
slouches. Another point about Marv and kind of tying into this Arizona roster in general, I did want to touch on was the situational aspect in terms of replacement. He's replacing Hollywood Brown as the de facto number one wide receiver on this team. They do have guys like Michael Wilson there as a 2, and I think their tight end, Trey McBride, is actually their real 2. But for all intents and purposes, Marv is the 1. And last season, for all intents and purposes, Hollywood Brown was the 1. I think what Arizona learned and what anybody paying attention learned is that Hollywood Brown is a very talented weapon, but by no means a number 1 receiver. I did some digging on this out of curiosity because it was just bothering me. I felt like he had a down year kind of again, and I looked at his numbers. He finished with 51 catches, 574 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And I thought about this, and I was
That ain't it.
those seem like wide receiver 2 numbers. But then I did more research, and I looked, and the 2 kind of young top wide receiver 2s that I consider to be the most elite 2s in the NFL, outside of maybe Brandon Ayuk, because it's a little more difficult by committee in San Francisco to judge who the 1 is. But clear-cut 2s, Devonta Smith had 81 catches for 1,066 yards and 7 touchdowns. Waddle, who also missed a handful of games during the year, just a couple, the way that Hollywood did, had 72 catches for over 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns as well. So we're talking double the yardage, 20 more catches. In Smith's case, almost double the touchdowns, double the yardage, 30 more catches. That's not going to get it done as a wide receiver 1 in the NFL, period. I love Hollywood. I love his new landing spot. I think he's a very gifted, explosive playmaking threat, but he's not a 1. And I think bringing in a 1 like this, if you're Arizona, is huge. And I think they brought in the 1 of 1s without having to pay a Jefferson or somebody to that level. That's the only other way you were going to get a guy this good. And getting him on a rookie deal, you guys are lucky, man.
Yeah, man. I mean, you have him for free for 5 years. I mean, really.
Yep.
It's. I think it was the easiest pick in the draft, right? I mean, probably Caleb was really the 1, but even then, I mean, you might have another couple other quarterbacks that you really like. The JJ talk, the Jaden Daniels talk, even Drake May, right? I mean, all those guys were kind of in that same group. Caleb was above him, but you could convince yourself. I mean, I know there was talks of Neighbors being wide receiver 1. He was never that, in my opinion. It was always Marv. He's just got some. He's just got it. You know what I mean? And that's not to say Neighbors doesn't, but when you're 6'3", 210 pounds and have the balance that he does, I mean, dude, he makes some of the craziest catches ever. Yeah. And it's like how did you do that? How did you get your foot down? Like your whole body's 10 yards out of the end zone. How'd you toe tap that? You know,
you got to think
how does
too
your body
that
bend like that?
You got to think too. It's going to be really important in moments in the game when the play breaks down and Kyler does 100%. What Kyler does so exceptionally. Yep. And you got to understand those off-balance throws, those cross-body throws, those broken route throws.
He's going to go get it.
They're difficult to They're difficult to throw accurately. So now you don't have to. You don't have to be on the money every time because you have a receiver who can adjust his body and make a play over a DB. It's a huge edge, especially with a guy like Kyler Murray and what his skill set is, which is play broken down, ad-libbing, throwing out of the pocket, moving, bootlegging left, bootlegging right. It's going to be exciting. I want to stay on the offensive side of the ball because you and I are Lions fans, and I feel like we understand the reality of this sort of fake star phenomena that happens.
Man, don't we?
Well,
you want to start rattling off the names?
Lions fans know lesser franchises in the NFL. You guys know who you are. Don't act like you don't know because you had a good season recently. You know who you are. The franchise will sell you through marketing and through jerseys and through different conscious context keys, like who they want you to kind of believe is the star of this team, even when it's not real.
For sure.
to me, James Conner has been that in Arizona for the last couple of years.
Yes, he has.
He's productive. He's kind of been the lone running back. I mean, I know they've had like they had DeMarcado last year. They've had like clear backups and some young guys who have been in there, but it's been Connor's backfield for years. But I think what's lost in this is James Conner has never been a star in the NFL on his best year, and they drafted a running back who I really like.
Yeah.
Do you think that this guy takes over the backfield in the first several weeks of the season, or how long do you think it takes for Trey Benson out of Florida State to take over the backfield in Arizona?
So going back to kind of your Lions analogy, I think multiple videos ago when we had talked about this, how the Detroit and Arizona feel like they're a similar team. I think in this regard, it applies as well, right? Like, doesn't James Conner kind of feel like that David Montgomery role, and Trey Benson feels a lot like the Jahmyr Gibbs role?
Yep.
Obviously not taken as high, so it'll probably, Trey Benson might not have the runway that Gibbs does, but it took a minute for Gibbs to get really, really, really involved. So I would say probably around that same time, but I think we're going to see the same type of thing play out where Connor's kind of your guy the first 5, 6, 7 weeks while they kind of ease Benson into it, and then Benson's going to have that game similar to how Gibbs did with the Vegas game last year.
Yep.
And it just pops, and you're like, oh yeah, this guy's him. And it's going to be that first like 60-yard run that he pops off, and you're just going to be like, the fan base is going to want it, right? Like you're going to feel that electricity in the stadium and be like, oh yeah, we have something here.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to go back to James Conner after you've seen that game happen already, right?
It's hard to get back in the pickup truck when you've just taken the Lamborghini out for a spin.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? You want to keep that.
I totally agree.
That outfit on.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too because this running back class was kind of faded in general. There's no Bijan, there's no Gibbs. We're not talking about stars in this class. This dude was insanely explosive and productive last year. I mean, Florida State was in the national championship mix before their college coach, before their quarterback got hurt.
Straight up.
And
undefeated, by the way. They didn't lose.
And unlike Georgia, unlike Michigan, unlike U of M, they don't have, even Texas, right? They don't have these pro prospect offensive linemen. So their running game was going through with very like middle of the road offensive line play. And these guys, I just think that when you can open up the playbook like that, when you can have these explosive plays, it's just a matter of time. And I think if you're an Arizona fan, you're sort of hoping that it becomes kind of a split backfield and Conner can stay healthy. But even last year, in a really good, productive season, his age 28 season was last year. This year, he's 29. He missed 4 or 5 games, I believe 5 last year in the middle of the season. I think Arizona really did a good job of getting ahead of this running back situation and getting a guy.
I totally agree.
At an affordable draft slot and just sort of being like, I just don't trust. The conversations. I don't trust at age 29 that James is going to come out and be productive and healthy all season. And it's I don't know. I like that. For at least for rookies, this was also a really defensive draft. What are you thinking about defensively that they did in this draft? Because we'll get to it, but that's more of an area of concern for me.
Yeah, man, when I was going through, I mean, their defense to me is the most like jarring thing, right? Like when you look at I was looking at their depth chart the other day, or the projected one, I should say, and it was pretty ill, bro. It was pretty foul. It was like, who are any of these guys? You know what I mean? Like you have the Buda Baker, you have the signing of Sean Bunting Murphy, which is a good signing. Don't get it twisted.
Don't get it wrong.
What did I say?
Sean, you said Murphy, Sean Bunting.
Hey man, Eagles fans will come after me if I get that wrong.
Yeah.
Yes, correct me.
Yeah, we don't want to alienate fans. We know who he is.
No, we don't. We don't. Yeah, we don't know. Facts. he had a strong year in Tennessee last year, but he played more of a nickel role where
Right.
he's coming into this situation kind of, it seems to be with the understanding of like cornerback one. And I think if that's your cornerback one, that's not a good position to be in. Going back to last year, they drafted a kid in the third from Syracuse. I think his name's Garrett Williams. I think they had a lot of expectations for him, and I believe he tore his ACL. So you don't really know what you have there. BJ Olorji, they took him in the second round last year from LSU.
The LSU guy,
who was an edge. Sorry if I got that name wrong too, but
Ojulari, I think.
Ojulari, yeah, that's probably how it's. That sounds more correct. Now I'm all paranoid about names, right?
Hey, it's all good. I got you.
Eagles fans got me fucked up. But they take a flyer on a guy in the second round who physically has all the traits, but didn't really translate last year. So the hope is, obviously they took Darius Robinson in the first round this year, and I mean he's a freak of nature, right? I mean
6'5", 295, and a bully.
Are you kidding me?
And
no, he's not fat. He's not. You know what I mean?
Right.
6'5", 300 pounds with no belly.
Right.
Like just muscle.
Dominant. Yeah. He's pushing guys around. Yeah.
So
he's pushing guys around.
For the success of this team this year, I think it's going to be incredibly important that Robinson hits, right? Like he's got to be an impact maker. Don't you agree?
100%. Yeah. I was looking through to piggyback off of what you were saying. I had the same thought, sort of that light bulb thing of going, because when we're getting into this, we're looking at the totality of these teams. Admittedly, we're not going deep diving into special teams. Okay, you got me. Walter
Shout out
White,
Matt Prater though. Shout out Matt Prater. We should have never let you walk. We should have never let you walk, Matt Prater.
We're not going through every player on special teams or whatever, but we are looking in depth at what these rosters are and what these guys did and kind of what they're projected to do. Along with watching the games as pretty consistently as we can. I watched a fair amount of these games. I think what scares me about this roster defensively in particular, personnel-wise, is the lack of positional value, right? I mean, you just touched on it. I don't think Sean Murphy-Bunting can be your corner one. But right now, that's what he is. And when we talk about the front seven, it completely lacks stars and it lacks dominance. It wasn't horrible last year, but it wasn't by any, like, no one's afraid of this front seven. I mean, you can't name me, pretty much anybody on it. Their best two players defensively right now seem to be a middle linebacker, Kaiser White, who I'm not really sure is a star, but he's productive. He makes tackles. He did end the year with a torn bicep. But he should be healthy. I mean, that's not like a career altering injury, but you got that, and then you have Budda Baker, who's a safety, who's really more of a. I almost feel like he's out of style. Like he's not really a cover safety. He's not really a speed safety. He's more of a. I don't want to go too far and say he's Jamal Adams, but he plays a little bit more downhill, right? So you've got a middle
linebacker-y almost,
and an aging 28-year-old safety in a contract year as your two kind of standout defensive players. Jalen Thompson is another one of their good pieces on defense. He's a safety. I'm not seeing the star edge. I'm not seeing the star corner, and that concerns which
totally agree.
Kind of ties into what you were saying, right? Darius Robinson has to kind of be a star if this defense is going to work. Because right now you guys don't have star powers and you don't have nearly enough disruption on the line, on the edge. One guy that I feel like might have too big of shoes to fill this season is a guy named Max Melton out of Rutgers they drafted in the second round.
Yeah, I didn't love that.
He has to start, and I don't see it. I'll be honest. Watching the tape, doing my due diligence. One thing I love about him, he makes plays on the ball. He gets picks. He tackles really well, but he struggles like he gets cooked on routes like fairly often for a corner one. And we're talking about in the Big Ten last year. I'm not talking about Marvin Harrison. I'm talking about guys on Iowa lining up and cooking him on routes like fairly often.
Yeah, that
I
ain't
don't
it.
think he's bad. I get why they drafted him, right? The upside is there. The
Mm-hmm.
playmaking, the turnover, the ability to create turnovers, right? Aiden Hutchinson for Detroit kind of can do that, where it's like he's out of
Yeah.
place sometimes, but he makes up for it with a strip sack that changes the game.
Yeah,
There's
right,
a
right,
lot of
right.
that with Max
Literally.
Melton. He makes plays and he can pick the ball off, kind of like a Trayvon Diggs, but he doesn't cover well consistently. And when they
Yeah.
don't have another guy, he doesn't get to go into that 2 spot and phase in. He's going to have to play
Yeah.
next year. And
Yeah, he will. He'll have to play a lot at
yeah,
least. I mean, I think the hope is that Garrett Williams is the starting cornerback
yeah,
on the right side, and then you got Bunting on the left. But still, I
hopefully,
mean, I mean, you
hopefully.
saw, yeah, right. Like I was gonna say, you saw what we had to deal with in Detroit last year, right? Like you have this constant rotation. I mean, people get hurt too. I mean, that's
Yeah,
just the reality of it. You got your cornerback one coming off an ACL tear. I mean, he might not even be
right,
ready. I mean, I don't. You
right.
know what I mean? I don't know. So
Well,
he's gonna see the field.
right, and you know how it is too. When you have a star player, it's like having 2 players. I mean, how many
Yeah.
times did Aaron Donald occupy 2 or
Oh my god.
3 offensive linemen at a
Oh my
time,
god.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Corner covers,
100%. Yeah. Sauce
great
Gardner. No, they're
cover
not throwing him
corners.
in.
Well, you're not throwing me the ball, so now I
No.
can double this receiver and I can leave our corner one on one. My problem with
Yep.
Arizona is they're an injury away from having like a special teamer out there or a rookie that was
Yeah.
picked in the 3rd,
Literally.
and
Yeah.
it's like here's my fear for Arizona and Arizona fans especially. The good news is the Jonathan Gannon hire is actually coming around full circle because you need him to coach
Yes,
up
it
the
is.
defense now and get the best out of guys
Yeah.
that I don't really feel like are that good, frankly.
Yeah.
The bad news is you don't have stars to cover up any warts on defense, so you almost have to play above everybody's level, and you
Hmm.
need these draft picks to hit. Like you need 3 of these guys to be like
For
consistent,
sure.
like multiple year starters on your defense, or you are fucked.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, I totally agree. I think
Yeah,
when you talk about, the positional value, um, you got your corner, or I'm sorry, you got your quarterback. That's the big piece, right? You
yeah,
got your left tackle, Paris Johnson Jr., who is, objectively very good last year.
yep,
You got your wide, and you hope that you have your edge, so that puts you in a position where over the next 2 years you can really up that secondary and then get the filler pieces. But
you're crossing your fingers.
you're crossing your fingers, man. I mean, that Robinson hitting that's it's risky. You know what I
It
mean?
is.
Like
It
it's
is.
not drafting in the top 5. It's taking a
No.
guy at 23 who, I saw mocked anywhere from 15 to like mid second round. And I do personally believe it's a good pick. I believe that he's going to be a problem, but
Yeah, me
especially
too.
with a defensive head coach. I mean, that's going to help him tremendously, but it's just, it's not Will Anderson, right? It's not like a
Right.
surefire thing. It's not Jalen Carter. It's a guy who, has all the physical attributes, who by all means performed last year in the SEC of all conferences. So on paper, it's all there, but it's got to translate. I mean, they
It's
just
almost
declined a
like
5th-year option on Zaven Collins, who's not
yep.
good, right? And he was
Yeah.
taken 16th overall. I mean, he
Yeah,
was
they've missed.
he
I
was
mean,
all
Steve
very good
Keim
on
missed
paper
on so
too.
many. Yeah, Steve Keim missed on
Tons.
so many defensive draft picks. But
He's hitting the bottle. That's why he's drunk.
so the thing with Darius Robinson is you're almost praying that he ends up being DeForest Buckner in
Oh,
Indianapolis.
100%.
Like he
100%.
has to be like an anchor staple piece, or this defense is in trouble because I don't see I don't see the playmakers, I don't see the stars, I don't see the personnel, and even if he doesn't land, you need like 2 or 3 of these defensive backs too. Like it's just
Yeah, you do.
they
You do.
I think they did the right thing in the draft, but it's going to be a tough sell, I think, with this defense for the next couple of years until they find some real pieces.
Yep, they're pretty far away on defense, but I think the offense can keep them in games close enough to where Jonathan Gannon should be able to do his thing, right?
Yeah,
Like he
I
might not
agree.
have the most high end talent, but if you're, if you're this defensive genius which we've, objectively seen, right, in Philadelphia, like we saw a great defense go to that Super Bowl and really, give Mahomes fits for 3-4
Yeah.
quarters basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
It can happen.
No, I agree with you.
You can go out there and win. You can go out there and win 7 games next year, and that's doubling your win total at that point. And in my opinion, that's a win because you show, as long as Kyler stays healthy, and I think he's going to have a much better year. I think he's matured a lot. It's the vibe feels like it's switched. The light switch has gone on, if you will, and it's like, all right, time to take this seriously.
Yeah.
I like. I don't love him next year, but I do like them. I think they'll be a very interesting team to watch.
Yeah, you answered my first question. Every time we do these, I want to write down a couple X factor players, like just guys that I'm excited about, like personally, selfishly as a fan. And with this team, I wrote down Kyler Murray, and I wrote down Trey McBride.
Okay.
To piggyback off what you said about Kyler, I like the bounce back. I think the biggest issue with him has been perception, maturity, and I think the wrong personnel for him. I think he needs to be able to feel like he's the leader of this team now.
Agreed.
I think the injury was humbling. I think he took the time he needed to on a cerebral level to get a little bit tapped into what he needs to do to grow as a quarterback. The injury thing is always a concern, but if he stays healthy next year, I'm projecting a huge bounce back season from him. I just think he can really play. And we've seen it for 6 weeks at a time, 5 weeks at a time. We haven't seen a full season yet of Kyler being great, but when we've seen him be great, he's one of the best quarterbacks in football on a talent basis. So I'm really excited for him next year. Another guy I wanted to touch on before we fade out with these guys, Trey McBride. I think that you and I are both fans of the tight end position. Like, we understand the value in this. I think it's a slept-on position. Trey McBride last year, Trey McBride last year felt like he emerged into a star player. He's 24. Last year, he didn't break out until week 8 against Baltimore, but he had 81 catches, 825 yards, and 3 touchdowns last year. And what was essentially, essentially 8 weeks as a featured player. And I gave you Hollywood's numbers earlier. He was absolutely their one. So my question for you is, present company included, right? What do we, in terms of like the guys that are veterans, do you think that we can be talking about Trey McBride next year as a top 3 tight end in the NFL?
I think it'll take a minute to get there, just knowing how the media maneuvers, you know what I mean? Like I watched with my own 2 eyes Sam Laporta every week be the best be the best tight end in football last year, and then I'm still arguing with people on Twitter like week
Mark
14
Andrews.
about him about him not even being top 5, and I'm like, no, I mean, he's really very much top 5 at this point.
It's coming around now. It's coming around.
No, I know it is, but my point is that public perception is what it is. It's going to be super hard to knock off like a Travis Kelce and a George Kittle and a Mark Andrews, but just for their marketability. But if you told me, like, if we sat down a year from now and we looked at the numbers and we saw that like some combination of like Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, and Brock Bowers were actually the most productive tight ends in the league next year, I wouldn't be shocked.
Right.
So it's hard to say, top 3. Do I think he could be? Absolutely. I think he could probably be 2 or 3. I don't know if he can be the best in the league, but he did perform unbelievably when Kyler came back. So a full year of Kyler, who knows what that could end up being? You know what I mean? It's the sky's the limit with this kid. I mean, he's unbelievable, right? Yep. And you've touched on it before, but there is this changing of the guard happening with the tight end position and
NBA style, right? With the KD,
very
Curry,
much so.
LeBron,
I think
right? Yeah.
I think the car's heating up for the Travis Kelce's and the George Kittles of the world, and you see that, right? I mean, Travis is coming off a back-to-back Super Bowl wins. He's got this huge podcast with his brother. He's dating the biggest pop star in the world. Like, that's a lot of distraction opposed to a guy like, Sam Laporta or Trey McBride, who are like in their respective kind of like small market, boring states, like there's not like a lot of hoopla going on there. It's Detroit or it's Phoenix, it's like, you're able to focus a whole lot more opposed to a Kansas City, a Baltimore, any of these other NFL hubs, San Francisco, another great example, right? It's like
Yeah.
there's not as much distraction in those cities, which I
Yeah.
think results in a lot more just focus on your job.
Sure. Sure.
So yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, and frankly, I just think Brock Bowers couldn't be that good, but
Yeah. I'm with you.
who knows what he's going to be. I mean, he's a rookie, but I think I think we're going to see that phasing out of those kind of top guys. I think it's going to start next year. And then I
Yep.
think, 2 seasons from now, we won't really even be talking about them as like elite talents anymore. They'll still have some juice, but
Yep.
it's going to be hard to top these kids that are coming in, man. These kids are really, really, really talented.
I agree. It's a fun time to be a football fan.
Yeah.
So we'll finish it up with this. We'll each do a bold prediction, and then we'll kind of give our closing, division record placement prediction. I'll start
Sure.
with my bold prediction. I have Marvin Harrison Jr. winning offensive rookie of the year next year. That's my bold prediction. Cardinals related.
Yep.
And then for my because we're just talking quarterbacks, right? So I'm going to
Sure.
roll the dice and say I actually think he's going to be so good, and these quarterbacks are
Yeah.
going to underwhelm people just a little bit. That
Yep.
this actually they're going to have to give it to him. And then my prediction for the record is I'm going 8-9. It's generous. I think they're
Sure.
going to double their win total from last year. I don't think it's going to be enough to compete for the division. I still like Los Angeles. I like San Francisco. I like each of those teams for 1 or 2 more
Yeah.
years. I think Seattle got better too. I think they might finish last, but it's going to be one of those really wonky divisions where in week
Yeah.
13 everybody's still in the playoff hunt.
Yeah.
And I want to say to Cardinals fans, you guys should be excited. After kind of looking into this team and watching what I watched last year and just reading what I'm reading, and obviously being a Kyler fan and a Marv fan, I'm excited for your future. And I think you guys are building something pretty cool. I think
Yep.
the dark days are
Yep.
over for you guys for a little while.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Yep.
Yeah, my bold prediction would be, I think Kyler's got, barring any more injuries, I think comeback player of the year is his to lose.
Yeah, I love that.
I think he's been talked about crazy for the last 9 months as far as like where he ranks amongst, the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I'm seeing a lot of lists come out, and I'm not seeing any of them include Kyler. And to me, I mean, he's a surefire top 10 quarterback. I think by the end of the season, everybody's going to know that again. By the way, he was before. I know it's been
I
a year,
agree.
but he still is. He's still that guy. And I think with the additions of Marvin Harrison and then Trey McBride year 2, I think we're really going to see. And that's also not to sleep on Paris Johnson, bro. He's got a dog at left tackle who's protecting him. So he's got more time to assess the situation. And man, he's got such a pretty ball when he's got
Yep.
the time to throw it. So yeah, I think Kyler's going to make his name known again. And then I think I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I'm going to go 7-10 just to be a little different.
Yeah.
I do think it'll be the same deal though. I think it'll be them in Seattle kind of in that race towards the end. I think Seattle has on defense what they kind of have on offense, and then like the other sides are kind of they're lopsided. So I give the edge to Seattle a little bit just because Geno is who Geno is, and they do have some great wide receivers, or they were great once upon a time. They're kind of aged at this point, but yeah, I don't know. I think 7-10 feels right. I think that's a giant win for them, though. I think that's what you should expect next year. I don't think you should expect the playoffs.
A feisty 7-10. I like
A
it.
feisty 7-10 who's
Yep.
super competitive, and 2 years from now, I think we are talking about them as like a win the division type team. Especially
Absolutely.
with the aging of Matthew Stafford and the the Niners not being able to keep the band together forever. I think they're in a great position to pounce when that that guard changes over.
I agree with you. Every dog has its day, and I think that
Fully.
Arizona is coming. Yeah, and I think on that note, we'll let these guys get out of here. Cardinals
100%.
fans, thank you so much for watching. Again,
Yeah, chime
please-
in. Let us know what you think. I mean, we
Absolutely.
didn't. We're not claiming to be diehard Cardinals fans, this is a couple days of research just kind of piled into one segment. But
Yeah.
if we forgot something, tap in with us. Let us know. We're curious. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
you tell us to go check a player out, we're going to go check them out. You know what I mean? We're going to put him on our radar. So
Absolutely.
yeah, let us know in the comments what you think, what your predictions are going to be for them next year. And yeah, we'll see you guys with the next video.
Like, comment, subscribe.
Subscribe.
Go Cardinals. Shout out Julian and a bunch of our friends who are
Facts.
Arizona fans.
Shout out the AZ Fantasy Football Group.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, man, and thanks for doing this with me. I'll see you on the next one, and yeah, go Birds, baby. All right.
Peace.